It all begins by presenting a world like ours, but completely in ruins. In the midst of a city, a communication system tells its inhabitants, emergency alert, prioritize children and the elderly, evacuate them immediately. However, everyone, panicking with great fear, starts running and looking for a hiding place. The vast majority trembles, wishing for it all to end, but other people, hidden and filled with fear, say, "It's coming." At that precise moment, a strong tremor is felt in the center of an imposing bridge, and suddenly, a great variety of monsters start entering the city. These monsters have different characteristics and sizes, with one of them being the size of a building. A group of citizens hiding in a building hears the monsters approaching, filled with fear. One man from the group, trying to calm himself, attempts to look outside. However, in the very second his gaze changes direction, he sees the immense monster looking at him with a big smile. He is unable to make a sound, and great fear runs through every fiber of his body. With a single movement, the gigantic monster destroys everything in its path, ending the lives of many people. Chaos reigns in the city, and with each passing second, multiple lives are lost. The citizens who are slowly being cornered can only run or seek help and salvation. At that moment, watching everything unfold from high above, a young man says in his mind, "This is not a dream or a game. Monstrous races have crossed the dimensional gate and entered the human world. For thousands of years, monsters had only appeared in legends, but now they haunt the cities of the 21st century. This is the reality we are facing now." Meanwhile, near the young man, a child and his dog are about to be devoured by one of the monsters. Suddenly, with a mysterious energy released, the young man descends from the building in a single leap. However, before he reaches them, a gigantic monster descends and attacks him from behind to devour him. Nevertheless, the young man sees it coming and without hesitation delivers a powerful blow that annihilates the monster instantly. This catches the attention of the monster that is about to devour the child. Taking advantage of this distraction, in the blink of an eye, he approaches the young man and moves him away at a safe distance from the destruction. The young man asks if he is all right. The child, very surprised, replies yes, but just as he finishes saying those words, the creature attacks them both with its powerful claws. The child is instantly paralyzed at the sight, but the young man, gathering great strength in his right fist, pulverizes the monster with a beastly strike. However, a large horde now stands before him, ready to fight. The young man takes a fighting stance and, concentrating to the fullest, without wasting a second, launches into an attack against his opponents. With a single wave of attacks, he ruthlessly dispatches all the monsters that cross his path. However, just as he defeats the last of the monsters that attacked him, a great shadow looms over him, and before he can move, he is crushed by the foot of the gigantic monster. This creature realizes that something strange is happening. From the ground, it can be seen that the young man, furious and withstood the stomp, gathers great power in a single point and, without hesitation, attacks the creature. This energy pierces through the immense body of his opponent, instantly annihilating it. Having practically cleared the area, the young man is about to move when he feels an alarming energy. He turns around and sees a person staring at him. The person removes their hood, showing a serious expression. The individual in front of him, moving their cloak, undergoes a kind of transformation and begins to release an intense energy similar to that of monster. At the same time, both of them gather great momentum and lunge at each other with all their power to defeat the other. The young man, determined and unfazed by whoever he faces, says in his mind, "One thing I know for sure, the monsters are behind me and I am the reason for all this." At that moment, the events of 8 months ago begin to unfold. It was noon, and the young man was heading to school. However, before he could reach it, he was intercepted by a group of bullies who hit him and mocked him while taking a photo. The photographer says to what appears to be the leader, "That guy looks dead," but the leader, holding the young man, responds, "Cockroaches don't die from things like this. Good day, another damn loser." Remembering this incident, the young man says in his mind, "At 19, when my power was still dormant, time passes, classes go by, and during lunchtime, the young man sits at a table to eat, noticing that anyone who looks at him immediately moves away. As he observes this, He eats in peace while saying in his mind, "My name is Gennaro, but they call me Trogo, a transferred student and an outcast." And that's not all. Later that day, during one of the breaks, Nero was about to take medication for his body when he is attacked by another one of the bullies. The bully calls him cursed and mocks him for taking medication every day. Additionally, remembering the fact that he doesn't have a mother, the bully laughs in his face and calls him an orphan. Those last words provoke an intimidating look from Nero. The bullies fall silent for a moment but then start laughing, claiming that he has an intense gaze and that they were almost scared, wondering if he's going to hit them. At that moment, the person who attacked him in the morning appears and says to the bullies, "Why do you bother the sick? You should treat the sick child with physical therapy." And after saying this, he starts throwing a flurry of punches at them. Nero, who doesn't even attempt to defend himself, says in his mind, "It doesn't matter if they hit me. What bothers me the most is that my body doesn't listen to me. I feel like there's a rusty chain tied around me. I can't move a single finger and my heart is about to explode with anger. Feels like there's a strange power holding me back. Just once, I don't care if it's only once. I want to get as angry as I want. I want to end with them all. They're asking for death." The young man's angry gaze disturbs the bullies, and one of them, pausing for a moment, says, "What the hell? Don't close your eyes, okay? You should be grateful every time you receive free treatment. You're going to..." However, before he could finish his sentence, a 19-year-old girl named Lily Luna appears and says, "Hey, get out of my way. I can't get water because of you. Leave immediately," she says, looking into their eyes. The attitude of the bully completely changes, and he responds, "What a coincidence to see you here. I'm sorry, you must have been very thirsty. I'll get out of your way. Enjoy your water." The group happily retreats just from having spoken to Luna, stating that it's the first time they've talked to her and that she's too beautiful. Nero stands in front of the young woman for a few seconds without saying a word and then leaves the place. Luna watches him leave, intrigued, and as she looks down, she sees her medicine, causing her to express astonishment. Shortly after, Nero heads to the school rooftop and stands at the edge, looking at the horizon. He thinks to himself, bullying takes place everywhere, and it just gets worse and worse. I can't do anything because I'm weak. They all seem happy, like they have no worries. Just as he's about to finish his thought, he receives a message from his grandmother, asking what he wants to eat for the day. As he reads it, Nero's expression changes, and he says, "Grandma." Having a flashback from the past where his grandmother told him when he was little, smiling, "You made a mess, Nero. You are a treasure to this old lady. Just seeing my Nero eat fills me up. Chew slowly and firmly. Nero, you're worth 10 lives. My little one, you're a good person, right?" Returning to the present, these memories have a strong impact on the young man, and in that precise second, a classmate appears and says to Nero with concern, "What are you doing there? It's dangerous, hurry and come down." Nero responds that he was just looking at the scenery, but his classmate replies, "It's still dangerous anyway. I didn't follow you." As he descends from the edge, Nero thinks to himself, observing his classmate, "Jun Jun. He only talks to me when no one else is around. Of course he'll be treated the same way if he's with me." Just as he passes by, Jun 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 asks if he's okay, but Nero coldly replies that he'll go first. Nero quickly arrives at his classroom and sits at his desk. Luna, who is also there, observes him curiously out of the corner of her eye, but her attention is stolen by the shouts of her classmate. They are looking at a photograph from a recent school trip, and the owner of the photo tells them to come closer to the window. They do so and start screaming, believing they see a ghost. Still, they don't take it seriously and change the topic after a few minutes. Time passes, and as the evening approaches in the structure of the photograph, a creature emerges from the shadows and sinisterly says, "The key. Find the key." On the other hand, Nero, who has arrived home, is tending to his wounds. However, at that moment, he hears his grandmother approaching and she says, "Nero, you're in your room. You're going to sleep. You should eat before going to bed." Nero, who has turned off the lights and covered himself with the sheets so she won't see him, replies, "I've already eaten with friends." The grandmother, able to see the objects he was using to tend to his wounds, seems to understand the situation and responds as she leaves, "Seriously, bring your friends next time. I'll make something delicious for them. Both the grandmother and the young man express looks of displeasure. Furthermore, later on, the grandmother, who is doing the laundry, comes across her grandson's hidden uniform and notices it has a shoe print. A mixture of anguish and anger fills her. On the other hand, time has passed, and a few hours before dawn, someone stands in front of the building where Naro and his grandmother live. At that moment, a tired mailman passing by says, "This is the last house. Let's finish quickly and go home." However, he hears a noise to his right and turns to look, becoming frozen as he contemplates a creature saying, "Skin, I need it." Then all turns dark before the man's eyes. The next morning, Naro, looking at himself in a mirror, says, "What should I do? It's more swollen than yesterday. My grandma would be surprised if she saw this." At that moment, his grandmother, who is doing something in the kitchen, shouts, "Naro, wake up. You have to go to school. But eat first. It's getting cold." Her grandson, covering his face with a towel, tells her that he feels a little unwell, so he's not hungry and that he will go take a shower. His grandmother tells him to at least eat a spoonful anyway. However, just before Naro enters the bathroom, someone rings the doorbell and he sees that it's a mailman who says he has a delivery. This confuses the young man, but seeing his grandmother nearby, he tells the mailman that it's open and goes into the bathroom. Naro sighs softly as he looks at his wounds, but still immediately gets into the bathtub. Meanwhile, the grandmother, who didn't understand who was at the door, walks towards it and a few steps away encounters the mailman. But in the precise moment their eyes meet, she is able to see that he is not human. The grandmother is extremely surprised to see the creature, but it is starting to deform its body. She shouts, "I found you!" The grandmother falls to the floor due to the creature's movement, and without wasting time, assuming an attacking form, it lunges at her to end her life. However, the grandmother manages to evade the creature's attack, receiving only a cut and emanating great anger. She says, "Finally, I found you again." And immediately, releasing a strange power, she manifests some kind of blood threads with which she traps the monster, and, taking on a demonic appearance, she says to the monster with great rage, "I warned you not to seek it again." Losing control, the monster replies, "The key. Until I find it, I will continue." Sacrificing its 2 arms, it breaks free from the grandmother's threads and attacks her directly. Both individuals exchange attack after attack, causing enough noise for Naro to wonder what he heard. He immediately turns off the water to listen carefully to what's happening. However, the grandmother, who immobilized the creature's body and mouth, tells him, "You better stay quiet." A couple of seconds pass, and not hearing any sound, Naro wonders if he misheard and lets the water run again, continuing his bath. At that moment, the monster strikes the grandmother, pushing her away and preparing to finish her off. Without wasting time, it attacks her with all its might. However, undeterred, the grandmother creates a large net surrounding the area they are in, and faster than a blink of an eye, she concentrates them around the monster's body, subduing. This causes a loud noise, making Naro certain that he heard something. He heads towards the door and asks his grandmother, "Is there a problem? That sound?" His grandmother realizes that her grandson hasn't noticed the water and soap, and quickly responds, "It's from the television. Maybe my ears aren't working well these days. I can't hear even with the volume turned up. There's nothing wrong." Her grandson returns to his bathroom, thinking that the grandmother had fallen again. This makes the grandmother sigh with relief, but her opponent, staring at her from the ground, says, "Even if you keep running, it's futile." However, immediately after finishing those words, the grandmother slices through her opponent, ending its life. The monster's body starts to disintegrate in front of the grandmother, who contemplates what has happened seriously. On the other hand, having finished his bath and looking at himself in the mirror, Naro says in his mind, "The swelling has subsided after washing as expected. Going to eat with this appearance is a bit." And just as he is about to finish that sentence, his grandmother sees her wound in a mirror, but faster than a blink of an eye, it seems to heal, and she mentions that she'll have to fix the logic. Both of them, dealing with their own concerns, simultaneously say, "What should I say?" They both conceal their condition as best they can and quickly separate. Time passed quickly at school. In the middle of physical education class, while running laps on a track, Naro reflects in his mind, she was thinking about something and that's why she left. But grandmother's expression was odd. "I wonder what's going on. No, let's focus. I don't want to sit alone in the corner all the time. Have to run. This is nothing, by the way. Has this field always been this big? In that second, as he ran out of energy, he falls unconscious to the ground. The teacher notices and quickly deploys a team to help him. At the same time, Naro has a dream where a person is running from a mysterious energy towards a whirlwind, and just before that person is caught, Naro regains consciousness. As he looks around, he says in his mind, "The nurse's office, my head. That dream repeats every time I faint. What the hell is this?" At that moment, he receives a call from his grandmother, thinking that perhaps the teacher notified her about what happened. However, his grandmother tells him, puzzling him, "We're going to move. It just happened, so come home early today." The pensive young man replies, "It hasn't been long since we came here and now we're moving again." And the grandmother continues, "Right now, Grandma has to go to the real estate agency. Pack your bags when you get home." Upon hearing that, the grandson asks seriously, "Are we running away again?" The grandmother remains silent and the young man thinks to himself, "She's always running away and I don't know the reason why. It has always been like this since I was a child." And he has a flashback of his past, remembering part of his childhood where he was transferred from school to school at regular intervals, and it was always the same. The children would isolate him because they would get scolded if they were rough with him, considering his weak body and the fact that he didn't have parents and only lived with his grandmother. Moreover, they thought everything about his condition was a lie. Returning to the present, the young man did as his grandmother asked, and on the same day, they moved to their new home. Once settled, in the middle of the night, his grandmother, looking towards the street, says in her mind, "They come more often every time. How long can I hold them back? How long can I keep them away from him?" On the other hand, at the same time, in a distant dump site, a creature emerges from a refrigerator and stone structures in the middle of a forest begin to crack slowly, releasing multiple monsters from within. A driver who is humming a song appears, and suddenly he hears a noise on the roof of his vehicle. Seeing that it lasted no more than a second, he continues singing. However, at that precise moment, a monster emerges beside him and repeats the same words from his song. It used to be just the two of them, but not anymore. The man, frozen upon hearing this, loses control of his vehicle, causing it to crash. Immediately, the truck is invaded by the large number of monsters that had emerged. After the horde of monsters attacked the truck, everything went dark and the night advanced. The next morning, in front of Naro's new apartment, a man is seen feeding a cat. The cat is very docile and grateful for the gesture. However, at that moment, the truck that crashed last night passes by. This startles the cat, causing it to scratch its benefactor and flee. The man is surprised by the cat's reaction. He is also able to hear many barks and animal noises coming from the building. Looking around, he observes that the truck parked in front of the building and a man went to the back and opened it. At the same time, Naro, who was eating with his grandmother, says, "What's happening with the dogs? They've been noisy for a while. Something must have happened." The grandmother, who seems to have sensed something serious, turns around quickly and a little uneasily. She tells her grandson, "Are you ready? You're going to be late. Hurry up and go to school." Her grandson, very calm, replies that there is plenty of time, but his grandmother rushes him, saying, "It's because I'm busy. Hurry up and go quickly. You need to tell the teacher about your transfer." All of this completely confuses Naro because yesterday his grandmother had told him to eat well first. Nevertheless, the young man begins to walk towards the elevator while saying in his mind, "The dogs are quiet now. Even Grandma. Things are really weird today." And in that precise second, the elevator doors open, and in front of the young man, many people whom he considers to be deliverymen come out. The young man lets them pass while wondering why there are so many of them. However, at that moment, the young man senses a kind of energy and, with a strange look on his face, says, "That smell. Where is everyone going?" Similarly, the young man takes the elevator, but looking at its number, he says in his mind, "I knew it. There's something strange." The elevator descends, and just at that moment, in front of the door of his new home, the deliveryman, with a monstrous look, ring the doorbell, and on the other side, the grandmother is already prepared for battle. On the other hand, Naro, who got off the elevator after taking a few steps, sees the delivery truck. He notices that it is half open and, approaching, he opens it completely while saying in his mind, There's not a single package here, so why are there so many delivery men? Just as he finishes thinking this, a loud noise that grabs his attention occurs, and he sees a person falling from where his house is located. Astonished by what he sees, he shouts at the nearby security guard, telling him that a man has fallen and asking him to report it. Without wasting time, he runs towards the elevator while thinking in his mind, "What's wrong with him? Isn't he coming down? What the hell is happening? Grandma?" The young man runs desperately towards his house, very worried about his grandmother. In that precise second, all the monstrous deliverymen attack the grandmother head-on. However, she, without being intimidated at all, gathers a great power and creates a large number of threads and eyes, slicing through her opponents in an instant. The monsters begin to disintegrate in front of the grandmother. However, one of them who managed to survive attacks the grandmother violently. She manages to defend herself in time and, counterattacking swiftly, tears it apart. It seems that everything is over, but at that moment, the grandmother hears laughter from the shadows. From the ashes of the fallen emerges a monster that emanates a dark aura and says, "Sana, it's useless to resist. The king's troops will come soon." Without wasting time, they attack each other, but the grandmother, filled with anger and being faster, catches the monster by the neck and says, "Nonsense. Will the troops crawl out of a hole?" The monster, with great anger, stares at her and, with a hand movement, breaks the grandmother's threads, injuring her. Then it screams, "Sana, open the gates to everyone. Give me the key. Let's welcome the king's troop." The monster brutally attacks the grandmother, and she quickly realizes that if this continues, it won't end well. Taking the offensive, she backs away slightly while capturing one of the monster's arms. Taking advantage of the opening created by this, she swiftly positions herself on the enemy's back and, with great skill, creates an immense number of threads to immobilize him. The monster writhes in pain from the grandmother's attack, and she, looking at it with determination, asks, "Who the hell is the king?" Meanwhile, Naro climbs the stairs and reaches the floor of his house. As he stands inside, the grandmother, facing the monster that repeatedly asks her for the key, tightens her restraints and tells him sternly, "I don't have the key, and the door for everyone is closed." The monster, exerting great force, continues repeating the same words and trying to free himself. He pulls strongly on his restraints, and in that precise second, Naro, feeling his heart about to burst from how quickly he ran, tries to open the door of his house. The grandmother, sensing his presence, without a second thought, anxiously looks in his direction and, using her powers, secures the entrance. Her grandson, unable to enter, shouts to his grandmother if she's okay. However, at that moment, the monster, having freed himself by taking advantage of the grandmother's distraction, attacks and pierces her body. The monster laughs uncontrollably as he does this, and Naru, hearing it from outside, begins to pound on the door, trying to enter while shouting, asking his grandmother what's happening and how she is. Nevertheless, inside, the grandmother, in one swift motion, tears off the arm with which she was injured from the monster and, staring at it intently, says, "How could you put your life in something so desperate? What's the point? I wish you'd leave us alone." Upon hearing those words, the monster, starting to smile, replies, "Us! Now that I think about it, there's a child, and to think that you were once the leader of the guard. I can't believe there's someone who makes you drop your guard. Perhaps it's that child." The grandmother, upon hearing that, wordlessly begins to emanate great murderous fury, and the demon, smiling, says in his mind, "Such a strong reaction, even though I merely mentioned it, it's clear." And a second later, he shouts, "If the king finds out about the existence of that child." However, before he could finish what he was saying, the grandmother, grabbing him by the head, smashes him against a door and says, "How did you find out about this place? Tell me, since you're going to die here anyway." The monster looks at its opponent with great anger, and realizing that they won't say a word, the grandmother swiftly ends its life. Meanwhile, outside the building, the security guard heads to where the young man directed him, but upon arrival, he is confused and claims that there is nothing there. Unbeknownst to Naro, who is shouting at his grandmother to please let him in, the monster who hadn't died and had climbed the building appears from another side. Inside the house, the bodies of the monsters are completely disintegrating. and the grandmother, deactivating her transformation, says in her mind, "We need to get out of here before they come back." However, feeling a hostile presence, she becomes alert again, and in an instant, she hears her grandson's voice calling for help. The monster and the young man enter, and the grandmother tells the creature, "Let him go. That boy is just a human." But the monster, pointing towards Naro's life, replies, "He's not just a human, he's a human who is important to you." The grandmother, seriously hearing that, says, "Let the boy go, and I'll give you what you're looking for." However, threatening the monster, she replies, "Sana, I am familiar with your cunning. Give me the key first." The grandmother, seeing the monster lightly stab her grandson, shouts in great helplessness, "No!" and manifesting her powers, prepares to eliminate the monster. But before she can make any move, Naro, shocked, says Grandma. She freezes for a moment, seeing her grandson's expression, and instinctively lowers her hands. At that moment, the demon shouts, "Now!" and taking advantage of the opportunity, he cuts off one of the grandmother's arms. Naro cries out in deep concern for his grandmother upon seeing this, and in an attempt to free himself, so he bites monster. In response, the monster throws him forcefully against the wall, causing him great harm. The grandmother becomes extremely agitated at seeing her injured grandson on the floor, and without a second thought, she runs towards him, asking how he is, completely exposed to any attack from the monster. Naro, witnessing this scene, freezes, and with a precise strike, the monster pierces the grandmother's abdomen. Naro, unable to contain his anger, stands up and lunges at the monster, shouting for it to die. But the monster, faster than Naro can follow with his eyes, pierces his body with a single movement. The young man falls to the ground, and the monster, admiring what it has done, says, "Head of the guard, Sana, I'm disappointed. I expected more from you. You turned your back on the enemy because of a nobody." However, in an instant, the entire area is overwhelmed by an intense killing intent. The monster instantly turns around, wondering what the hell it is, and sees that the grandmother has manifested her power, enveloping the entire place. It is unable to move a muscle due to the fear it feels, and the grandmother, with just a flick of her hand, unleashes a countless number of threads against her opponent. They surround every inch of the monster's body, and before its helpless eyes, she clenches her fist, shredding every fiber of the monster's body. The grandmother, victorious but exhausted, falls to her knees on the floor. Naro, on the verge of death, loses consciousness. In that state, he begins to see a series of events, while a voice says, "It was the beginning of long and terrible days." A loud scream is heard from the ground, as if the entire mountain were flooded with blood. He visualizes a cliff where a person screams, "Sana, please take care of Naro. Go quickly." And in that instant, the grandmother jumps into the sea. Naro, in a limbo between life and death, starts to hear a voice telling him, "Naro, don't die. You must survive." Opening his eyes slightly, he begins to say, "Who are you?" That voice, I think I've heard it before. At that precise moment, he has a flashback from the past where, as a child, he relentlessly beats others because they told him he had no mother and that he only lived with his grandmother. However, a few seconds later, the boy's mother appears and, pulling him by the ear, says, "Look at those eyes. Is this how your grandmother raised you?" This angers Naro, and his mother takes him away and scolds him for the fact. But when he is left alone, unable to contain his emotions, he says remorsefully, "Grandma." In the present, the grandmother holds her grandson with much love and gentleness in her arms, but upon seeing his state and realizing that he is very cold, her emotions overwhelm her, and she begins to shed a sea of tears, holding him tightly. She forces herself to remain calm, sitting by his side. Having analyzed the situation, she says in her mind, "The hordes of the rebels continue to rule the land. The rift in this place seems to widen even further. I don't know where the soldiers came from." Manifesting a great power around herself and her grandson, she continues, "I have no choice but to return the weapon I took from the little prince and send him to the battlefield. All the vitality I have left will be put into this delicate body. The burden on his life will now be heavy, but it is also his destiny." The young man's body accepts this energy, and immediately the chains that tormented his body break, and he begins to rise, surrounded by great power. With much love, his grandmother reaches out her hand to touch him. But just before she can reach him, her hand and body begin to disintegrate. Still, with a smile and tears in her eyes, she says, "It's the end for Sana, the head of the guard. Goodbye." The grandmother's body completely disintegrates, bringing an end to her life. Several minutes pass, and suddenly, in the middle of the room, Naro opens his eyes again and, looking around without any wounds, says, "Grandma, where are you?"